Russia might be launching a new wave of mobilization. What's going on? This article from Le Point reported, is Russia running out of soldiers? The Kremlin is preparing to mobilize its reservists. Well, actually, it's not just a rumor. It's actually happening. On November 4th, Putin signed a law on calling up reservists for special training to protect critical infrastructure facilities. The question is, why is Russia suddenly calling up reservists? Officially, it's to beef up defenses against Ukrainian drone strikes. But still, is there another reason as to why Russia is suddenly calling up its reservists? Especially when they already have tens of thousands of volunteers enlisting in the armed forces every month. And the other question is, will this mobilization change anything on the battlefield in Ukraine? That's what we'll explore in this video. Historically speaking, Russia often resorted to levies to fill in the ranks of its army. For example, during Napoleon's invasion of Russia, 220,000 Russian serfs were drafted into provincial militias. Fast forward to 2025, the Ukraine war and round 2 of the mobilization. First of all, who exactly is considered a reservist? You see, in Russia, the Zapaz refers to the military reserve of the armed forces. It consists of citizens who have completed their mandatory military service and can be mobilized in wartime. This represents a pool of multiple millions of men. For example, on September 21st, 2022, President Vladimir Putin announced a partial mobilization of 300,000 reservists from this exact General Zapaz pool. When called up, the time of service for these reservists is indefinite. They remain in active service until a specific presidential decree for demobilization is issued. And looking at the situation in Ukraine, yeah, it's not happening anytime soon. But then you also have the active reserve. These are the people targeted by this new law. In this document called the Future Russian Way of War Part 1, it says that Russia began to develop a nascent mobilization capability in 2014. This comprised a combination of territorial defense battalions and the Combat Army Reserve, also known as BARS. On top of that, there's a voluntary active reserve program modeled after systems like the US Army Reserve. Essentially, whether you're a veteran, a former conscript, or just a civilian, you can sign a contract to be part of the active reserve, where you will go through military training in exchange for some financial compensation, some good old cash. That way you can play soldier during the weekend and then carry on your life. So as someone that signs a 3-year contract as a simple soldier as part of the active reserve, you will get an upfront payment of 2,500 rubles or 30 USD. From what I've been told, a Big Mac-like burger in Russia costs 3 USD, so you can get 10 of those. And then you also get 2,500 rubles every month. Oh yeah, but that's not all. You can also get bonuses averaging 25,000 rubles for each month you're out training in the field. Look, the pay is not crazy, even for Russia. Because of that, reservists spend most of their time living normal lives, working, studying, chatting up baddies, and just going about their daily lives. But then they play soldier on the weekend. Their requirement is to spend 54 days a year training. Every 3 months, they go through 6 days of individual training, so essentially 1 weekend a month. And every 6 months, reservists train with the entire unit for a duration of 15 days. 2 times 15 days, that means during the entire year they go through 1 month of training out in the field, and that's where they'll get this 25,000 ruble bonus. This active reserve component is really interesting. This means as opposed to general reservists that completed their military service 15 years ago and haven't touched an AK ever since, these active duty reservists have recent military training. They already have their gear, they're already part of a unit and a command structure. And most importantly, they're volunteers, but we'll get to that later in the video. So, Russia wants to make use of its large pool of reservists. Nobody really knows how many there are. General Deputy Kartapalov mentioned 2 million people. Most Russian analysts believe this is wishful thinking by the Ministry of Defense, and that more realistically, the estimated number is at least 250,000 contract reservists. 250,000, not bad. You will ask me, but what about the kontraktniki, the contract soldiers, voluntary enlistments? Well, in June 2025, Dmitry Medvedev reported that the Russian army recruited 210,000 contract soldiers in the first half of 2025, or an average of 35,000 per month. It's an enormous amount of recruits, especially since they all know they will be sent to fight in Ukraine. With so many men entering the armed forces, why is Russia suddenly calling up reservists? Well, I see 5 possible explanations. Number 1, recruitment crisis. The number of contract soldiers publicly announced is inaccurate. Let's say it's lower than the official 35,000 recruits per month, maybe only half, who knows. Alternatively, these figures are true, but now the number of volunteers is running out. Number 2, their money has run out. Maybe the sanctions eventually took their toll. To attract many volunteers, Russia offered generous salaries, enticing enlistment bonuses, but eventually got too expensive for the Ministry of Defense, as this represents trillions of rubles. Option number 3, heavy casualties. Russia needs to replace losses sustained on the front lines, and the inflow of contract soldiers is simply not enough to keep up with attrition. Number 4, relieve the mobilized personnel from 2022. Here the ISW stated, compulsory rolling call-ups of reservists may enable the Kremlin to demobilize servicemen mobilized in 2022 to appease segments of Russian society and assert that Russian forces in Ukraine are fighting on a fully voluntary basis. Overall, Mediazone also mentioned 16,000 of these mobilized personnel as KIA. Then there's also multiple times that number of wounded, but this means in theory there's still tens of thousands of them at the front that were mobilized in fall 2022. It's been 3 years now. 3 years! And they've also witnessed the drastic evolution of warfare. But by now, many of them must be exhausted. So this call-up of reservists could be done to rotate all these troops. Number 5, everything is fine. Russia just wants to raise new divisions, open new fronts, and give a final blow to Ukraine. Let me know in the comment section which option do you think is the most plausible. Maybe it's a combination of all these explanations. What we know is that calling another massive mobilization will be unpopular in Russia. Many analysts believe the Russian Ministry of Defense thought of another way to proceed, a more subtle way, that is to mobilize the active reserve. Think about it, tens of thousands of men, possibly 200, 300,000, are currently getting paid each month by the Ministry of Defense to basically chill and play soldier on the weekend. Calling up reservists is a good way to conduct a second wave of mobilization without a strong increase in social tension, since these people signed contracts that legally allows the army to mobilize them. Of course, most of them signed up just to get some free cash, without thinking that if a war erupts that maybe they could be sent to the front. Bliat moment, right? So the lesson is, if a deal looks too good to be true, it's probably a trap. Here Medusa reported Russia's new reservist law looks like another quiet mobilization. They wrote, in practice, this new law will likely involve defending energy, transport, and industrial sites from Ukrainian drone attacks. Officially, the reservists that will get called up will be part of mobile fire groups to defend strategic objectives and partake in counter-terrorist operations in their respective regions. So officially, it's a local deployment only. And Medusa concluded by stating that Russia's new reservist legislation looks more like a new mechanism for drawing people into the armed services without resorting to a direct mass call-up. By the way, there are other decrees that were also passed around the same time. From what I read, previously the reserve could only be used during general mobilization or wartime, but now it will be possible to use it in peacetime as well. There's also federal law number 127FZ, effective January 1st, 2024, which increased by 5 years the mobilization age limits for reservists. So for enlisted personnel, sergeant, warrant officers, all the lower ranks, it's raised from 35 to 40 years old. For junior officers, lieutenants, raised to 50. Mid-level officers, majors, colonels, raised to 55. And for senior officers and generals, raised to 70. So we can feel that something is brewing in the background. So once again, officially, these reservists will only guard and secure critical infrastructure across Russia. And that could be the end of the story. And there's a lot of information that points towards this direction. But check this out, here from the Moscow Times we can read, at least 15 regions, including the Leningrad, Nizhny Novgorod, Tambov and Yaroslav regions, have already begun recruiting reservists to guard these facilities. Authorities stress that these recruits would not be sent to the front. At the same time, you should look at the fine print in the contract. Again, from the Moscow Times, a source at one of Russia's largest oil and gas companies told Vyurtska that the company's security team doesn't have high expectations from the reservists. The source also said that even an extra 10 people with rifles would help, but fundamentally only real army air defense can protect us, and we're unlikely to get that. That's the thing. What can regular infantrymen really do against Ukrainian drone attacks? This is why this entire story looks very fishy. So, in the end, the scheme could look like this. Step 1. Reservists will be called to serve in mobile fire groups. To guard oil refineries, for example, protect them from drone strikes, somehow, always being promised they will not participate in the special military operation. However, Russia's Ministry of Defense will soon discover that infantrymen cannot do much against drone strikes. For sure, they can patrol around facilities and try to find enemy spies or special forces operators, but that's about it. Step 2. After some time riding pickup trucks and ladas around oil refineries, they might start doing more hands-on training. Oh, let's practice digging trenches. Let's just practice assault operations, but don't worry, you won't be using it. And eventually, the general staff could make a difficult decision to deploy them to the front in Ukraine. Step 3. You need a reason to justify this move. Officially, this decision can be justified by the need to replace those mobilized in 2022. Now, according to some Russian analysts, perhaps only 100,000 of the mobilized from 2022 remain at the front. Honestly, nobody really knows. We said 16,000 KIA, plus multiple times that number for wounded that got discharged. And ultimately, many were indirectly coerced by their officers to sign contracts with the Ministry of Defense. So that's how people come up with the number of 100,000. Ultimately, the scheme could be to call up another wave of 200, 250, 300,000 reservists to replace the ones mobilized in 2022. Public opinion will be satisfied, the treasury of the Ministry of Defense will be satisfied, and in the end, the Russian armed forces could once again get a sudden boost in manpower, which, according to me, could be operational by spring 2026. That's all I have for you today. See you in the next one.